They told us the Third Secret of Fatima was already revealed. But they were wrong. For decades, the Vatican assured the faithful, "It is finished. It has all been told." Yet, in the silence that followed, heaven's true words still trembled, locked away, waiting for the moment when the world would be ready, or when it would be too late. Something was missing. Something that Sister Lucia herself hinted at, but never spoke aloud. A warning, a cry, a vision that burned so fiercely it could split the soul in two. And now, in the shadow of Pope Leo XIV's quiet yet unshakable rise, a key has turned. Not in marble halls, but in a hidden chamber beneath Albano, where the scent of ancient incense clings to the stones, and a sealed wooden box rests under the watch of those who swore never to speak. That key was placed in the hands of one man, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, a man the world sees as gentle, smiling, a bridge between peoples, but heaven sees as a messenger for an hour of trial. It began on a humid August night, the same week Pope Leo XIV addressed the world about the family being the first place we receive the love and support to move forward. A noble theme. Yet beneath the warmth of those words, a hidden appointment was made. Tagle was summoned in secret. No cameras, no press, only a papal aide who whispered a phrase not heard in decades. The great ones have decided. The box will be opened. The box was unlike anything in the Vatican archives. Dark wood, bound in tarnished silver bands, with an inscription in Portuguese that read, "Para ser aberto somente no tempo do fogo," to be opened only in the time of fire. Inside, not gold, not jewels, but a folded letter, browned with age, bearing the unshakable handwriting of Sister Lucia. And as Tagle read, his hands began to tremble. The smile the world knew faded into a silence that felt heavier than death. The letter spoke of a leader who would rise with great favor in the eyes of the nations. A pope who would gather the poor to his table, who would speak of Eucharistic love as a conscious choice of God, yet who would also stand at the threshold of the last trial. It warned of a false light that would enter the church disguised as mercy, and a day of decision when every shepherd would be forced to choose. And then, a final line, underlined twice. When the family is torn, and the shepherds are divided, look to the man from the islands, for he will carry the last key. Tagle read it again, and again, until the truth became clear. It was him. The prophecy wasn't pointing to a future figure. It was naming the moment, now. That August, he was not merely attending conferences about digital missionaries and warning influencers against falsehood. He was being prepared to deliver a message that could fracture the church, or save it. Outside Albano, the air was heavy, as if the world itself knew something had shifted. Reports of strange lights over Rome began to circulate online, dismissed by some, whispered about by others. Pilgrims claimed to hear a woman's voice in prayer near the Castel Gandolfo gardens, repeating, "Do not be afraid, the time has come." And yet, the Vatican remained silent. Pope Leo XIV, smiling for the cameras, spoke of unity, of love, of peace. But those close to him noticed the moments he would stare into the distance, as if listening for a sound no one else could hear. A sound of footsteps, approaching fast, and somewhere in the Apostolic Palace, the box now lay open, its seal broken, the words of Fatima no longer bound by time. What will happen when the world hears them? When the prophecy, long hidden, speaks for itself? Because make no mistake, the third secret was hidden for a reason. And tonight, that reason is standing in the Vatican, holding the last key and deciding whether to turn it. The corridors of the Apostolic Palace were darker that night, not because the lights were dimmed, but because the very air seemed to absorb the glow. Cardinal Tagle walked alone, the echo of his footsteps swallowed by walls that had heard centuries of confessions, betrayals, and divine decrees. In his hands, the opened letter of Sister Lucia, the words still burning into his mind like fire branded into wood. At the far end of the hall, two members of the Swiss Guard stood before the papal study. They did not ask why he came. They only stepped aside. Inside, Pope Leo XIV sat at a simple desk. No grand throne, no crowd of advisors, Only a crucifix, a single candle, and a parchment he had been reading for hours. He looked up, and for a moment, the weight of the fisherman's ring seemed heavier than gold, heavier than iron, heavier than the whole world. "Luis," the Pope began, voice steady but carrying that tremor only a man of prayer can recognize. The tremor of a soul confronted with heaven's urgency. "You have read it." Tagle nodded, his throat too tight for words. And then, a sound. A low, rolling rumble, as if a storm had awakened over Rome, though the night sky outside was clear. The crucifix on the desk seemed to shiver. In that moment, both men understood. The spiritual battle Sister Lucia had foreseen was not approaching. It was here. "Do you see now?" Leo's voice rose, not in anger, but in a holy fire. "The Church, the bride of Christ, is standing at the edge of purification." The third secret was not merely a warning. It was a countdown, and the hour has struck. Tagle placed the letter on the desk between them. "Holy Father, they will resist you. The cardinals, the factions, those who wear the red but have hearts of stone. They will say this is madness, that we are stirring fear." Leo's eyes narrowed, and for the briefest second, Tagle saw not the gentle pastor the world adored, but the warrior shepherd heaven had chosen. "Then let them say it. Let them shout, let them scheme. For the wolves have already entered the fold, and if the shepherds are silent now, the blood will be on their hands." Outside, the bells of St. Peter's tolled unexpectedly, not for a mass, not for a death, but in a slow, solemn rhythm that rippled through the city. Pilgrims in the square looked up in confusion. Some began to pray aloud, others wept without knowing why. Inside the study, Pope and Cardinal leaned over the ancient parchment, tracing the words that spoke of a great light from the east that would blind the false shepherds, and a cry from the islands that would awaken the faithful. They knew what it meant. It was not poetry. It was a map, a divine strategy for the final clash. Far beneath them, in the hidden chambers of the Vatican library, certain doors began to open. Doors sealed for generations, where documents marked periculosum had slept in darkness. A select few, cardinals aligned with neither side, were being summoned. Not by public decree, but by messengers who carried no official seal, only the words, "The time of silence is over." And yet, somewhere in those same walls, others were moving. Men whose robes concealed ambitions far older than their vows. The secret factions, those who saw the Church as a crown to be worn, not a cross to be carried, had also learned of the letter's unsealing. And they were not coming to listen. They were coming to stop it. The clash of powers was no longer theological, it was imminent. Heaven's last warning, placed in the hands of two men, now stood at the center of the greatest spiritual battlefield since Golgotha. And as Pope Leo XIV rose from his desk, placing the letter inside his cassock, he whispered only one line, not to Tagle, but to the crucifix before him. "Lord, your bride will not be taken without a fight." The candle flickered, the bells continued, and somewhere deep within the Vatican, an ancient prophecy stirred to life. The night that followed would be remembered, not in the public record of the Church, but in the living memory of heaven itself. The air over St. Peter's seemed charged, a strange pressure, as though creation itself was holding its breath. The moonlight poured over the basilica's dome, but in the shadows of the colonnade, figures moved, not pilgrims, not priests. These were the hidden ones, men whose faces were known only to a few, cardinals who spoke with one voice in public, yet swore secret oaths in private. Inside, Pope Leo XIV stood at the main altar, the ancient crucifix towering above him. Cardinal Tagle was at his side, clutching the letter, the words of Sister Lucia now burning into his very soul. The echo of footsteps began to fill the basilica. The factions had arrived. The leader among them, an older cardinal with eyes like steel, stepped forward. "Holy Father, this cannot be allowed. You will not speak these words to the faithful. You will cause panic, division, collapse." Leo turned slowly, his voice steady but laced with a power that was not his own. "You speak of collapse. but you hide the cracks. You fear division, but you sow it in secret. This is not my word. It is heaven's, and it will be spoken. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some cardinals shifted uneasily. Others stared with cold defiance. Then, the sound. A single peal of thunder. Without a cloud in the sky, the candles along the nave flickered violently, as if resisting an unseen wind. And from the upper gallery, a small golden feather drifted down, landing directly on the parchment in Tagle's hands. He looked at Leo. Both of them knew what it meant. The archangel was near. One of the opposing cardinals sneered. Signs and symbols, nothing more. We are the guardians of the church, not its destroyers. Leo's eyes burned. No, you are the gatekeepers of your own thrones. The bride of Christ is not yours to control. She belongs to the bridegroom alone. The tension broke. Two of the faction cardinals stepped forward, reaching for the letter. Tagle did not move back. Instead, he raised it high, his voice echoing. If you tear this from my hands, you tear it from the hands of heaven, and then it happened. The great bronze doors of the basilica slammed shut on their own, the sound shaking the marble floor. The lights above dimmed until only the crucifix was illuminated, its shadow stretching across the floor, falling directly between the Pope and his accusers, a line that could not be crossed. One by one, the opposing cardinals stepped back, not by choice, but as if an unseen force pressed against their chests. The elder among them staggered, clutching his heart. A voice, clear, commanding, but from nowhere, filled the air. The hour of the bride's purification has begun. Let no man silence the word of heaven. Tagle's knees weakened, but Leo's voice rose like a trumpet. You have heard it, not from me, not from Luis, from the one who stands over the church since her birth. Stand aside, or stand condemned. No one moved. The silence was unbearable. And yet, in that silence, the Holy Spirit moved like a fire through the nave. The faithful, outside, unaware of the confrontation, began to chant the rosary, their voices rising in unison, a living wall of prayer encircling the basilica. Leo stepped forward, the letter still in Tagle's hands. Luis, tomorrow you will speak, not to the Curia, not to the factions, but to the world. The third secret will no longer belong to the archives. It will belong to the faithful. From somewhere deep in the basilica, the bells began to ring, unbidden, unstruck by human hand. It was the sound of heaven's summons, and above them, in the stained glass of the Holy Spirit window, the golden dove seemed to move. The dawn that followed did not feel like any other morning in Rome. It felt heavier, as if the entire city was caught in the breath between two heartbeats. News had spread, without the Vatican's official voice, that something was coming. Something the Church had kept sealed for decades. Something that would be spoken today. The world's media gathered in St. Peter's Square, their cameras trained on the papal balcony. But it was not Pope Leo XIV who would appear first. It was Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. He stepped forward slowly, the parchment of Sister Lucia's letter clutched in his hands. Not a mere document, but a divine blade forged for this hour. The crowd was restless, expectant. But when he raised his eyes, silence fell like a sudden storm. They told us, Tagle began, his voice steady yet trembling with the weight of heaven, that the third secret of Fatima had already been revealed, that nothing more was hidden. But they were wrong. What I hold here is not a legend. It is not a conspiracy. It is a warning, a roadmap, and a call to battle for the bride of Christ. Behind him, Pope Leo stood at the center of the balcony, his hands clasped over the crucifix on his chest. The wind began to rise, though the sky remained a clear, piercing blue. Tagle continued, each word cutting through the air. Sister Lucia spoke of a time when the shepherds of the church would be divided, when a false light would cloak itself in mercy, when nations would rise against the gospel, and the blood of the martyrs would again flow in the streets. She wrote of a great trial, a purification, that would come not to destroy, but to cleanse the bride for the return of the bridegroom. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in on his hands, where the ancient ink trembled in the breeze. And she wrote, Tagle's voice deepened, that when the world could no longer tell truth from deception, when even within the walls of the Vatican, wolves dressed as shepherds would seek the throne, then would come a man from the islands, who would hold the final key. And that key is not power. It is not position. It is obedience to the will of God, even unto death. The crowd erupted in shouts, some in awe, others in fear. And then, the sign. A sudden shadow passed over the square, though there was no cloud. The great bronze cross atop St. Peter's gleamed with a light so bright it hurt the eyes. And in that light, for the briefest moment, the form of a woman could be seen, clothed in the sun, her mantle streaming across the sky. Those who saw it fell to their knees. Others wept openly. Pope Leo stepped forward then, his voice carrying over the roar. This is not the end. This is the hour of decision. Heaven has spoken, and we will not be silent. The bride of Christ will stand, purified, unafraid, and unyielding. The gates of hell will not prevail. As the bells of St. Peter's exploded in a peal that shook the city, the chanting began. Tens of thousands of voices crying out the Hail Mary in unison, drowning out the noise of the world. Above, the golden dove in the window of the Holy Spirit blazed so brightly that even those outside the square could see it. And in that moment, the factions within the church knew the battle had begun. There would be no turning back. The third secret was no longer a secret. It was a sword, and it had just been unsheathed.